So I went from zero coding knowledge to actually landing a software engineering job in just a few months, but I almost didn't. At some point when I was teaching myself computer science, I came this close to quitting, and that was all because I was making these 5 rookie mistakes that all beginner programmers make, and these mistakes end up wasting months if not years of your life if you're not aware about them. And turns out I'm really not alone in this. In fact, according to this study by MIT and Harvard, only 5 to 10% of the people that take their online coding courses actually finish them. So that means that most of us quit before we even have any chance at success. But what if I told you there is an easy way to be one of the few that succeed? What if I told you that the 5 to 10% that end up with the high-paying jobs aren't geniuses or anything? They just knew about these 5 mistakes when they were learning and they just avoided them. So what are these 5 traps that beginners make? Well, let's find out. The first and arguably the most deadly of all traps you can make as a beginner programmer is to fall into tutorial hell. And let's be real, we've all been there. You want to teach yourself how to code, so you go on Google and you Google where to start. So you find this 4-hour JavaScript tutorial on YouTube and you're like, great, this seems amazing, but you quickly realize you want something else, maybe something more formal. So you go and find an online college course that is free, but you end up realizing this course is also quite difficult and complex. So you tune it down and go for another resource and you just end up jumping over and over and over like this, but you realize that you're not learning anything. You're just staying at the same surface level without getting any deeper knowledge. That's what we call tutorial hell, and it's really easy to avoid. You see, the reason why people fall into this trap in the first place is that they're afraid that they're missing out on something else. They're afraid that they picked the wrong resource, and they're afraid that they're missing out on other more valid, more important information somewhere else that will help them learn faster. But here's the secret. They're all pretty much the same. So all you have to do is just pick one and stick to it because they're all pretty good. As long as you pick one resource that is somewhat known and reliable, well then you're already ahead of 50% of your competition. But to be ahead, you have to stick to that one resource because that's the mistake that people make. If you don't stick to that one resource, you're going to just stay at the same surface level. So I want you to treat this class or this tutorial that you're taking as your wife. It's now your most valuable partner, and there is no way in hell that you're going to cheat on her, because if you cheat, it's only gonna make your life a misery. But if you stick with your partner, well then you'll get a much deeper understanding of what love is, programming is, and you'll realize that you're going to have learned much faster and much more effectively than those people that are just going left and right through courses and classes and never going much deeper than that. Now I want to emphasize that this decision of picking a course and sticking to it should really not stress you too much. So to help you with that, I've actually added in the link below a brief summary of some of the most reputable online courses you can take and online resources you can use, and a quick description of what these resources do for you and what path they lead you towards. But avoiding tutorial hell is not everything, I know, sorry. And any self-taught programmer will tell you that this second mistake is actually the most important one to avoid, and it's the one of going in without any plan. Now, if you want to have any chance at success as a self-taught programmer, you're going to need a plan. And to really nail down the importance of this point, I want you to think about why people even go to college in the first place. Why do people go to higher education? Because if you're thinking about it, all the information you can get from college is available for free online these days. So why do people pay tens of thousands of dollars to go to college to learn? Well, some of you guys are going to say, well, it's for the diploma, the paper is important. Yeah, sure, okay, the diploma is important, but I would argue that there is something much more important that people are actually paying for, and that is a structured path. I would argue that people are willing to give up on tens of thousands of dollars just so they can have someone holding their hand and telling them, hey, this is the path towards getting a job. But here's a little secret. You can do all of that on your own without spending a single penny. And that sounds like a really attractive option, right? But you're going to need a plan. And to have a good plan, you're going to have a plan that has these 3 characteristics. And the first one is that you need to have a clear written down goal, because as this Harvard study has shown in 2013, actually writing down your goal has a direct correlation with success and earning much more money, up to 10 times more money in the end, if you write down your goal than if you didn't. And the second part of any good plan is it has to have a schedule that you can hold yourself accountable to. So you want to write deadlines and dates that you want to respect to ensure that you make a quick and realistic progress instead of just lazing off in the background. And third, your plan has to have a dedicated space, whether physical or digital, where you can just switch gears and focus on the work at hand. Now I know that this tip is kind of tricky because it seems like a motivational speech without anything that you can do about it. But here is actually one super actionable step that you can take to make sure that you have a more effective planning is to install the software called Notion. Now, I know I sound like a sellout, but hear me out, I am not sponsored by Notion, and the reason why I encourage you to try this software is because I know from personal experience that this has been the most useful tool for me to go from serial procrastinator to actually successful self-taught programmer. And if you're curious about how I did that, well, I invite you to click on this video where I explain in 5 minutes how I taught myself computer science using Notion. But with that aside, we need to talk about the third mistake, which is actually the easiest one to avoid, but also the most damaging one if you don't avoid it. And that is the mistake of not doing project-based learning. So at first, coding is not a skill that just matches with our stupid monkey brains. It's just a bunch of characters that you put on the screen and it's really nothing tangible. So we have to train ourselves over time to be able to interpret what those lines of codes mean. And to do that, you have to use projects. If you're learning through tutorials, then you're relying entirely on your memory to grasp these difficult concepts that you're trying to teach yourself, which, if you think about it, makes no sense because you're using only a tiny part of your super powerful brain. Instead, what you want to do is to start to build projects as you learn, which in turn will allow you to learn more and also to capture these intangible lines of codes and turn them into concrete applications, which are much easier for your brain to understand. And this is project-based learning. It's just a fancy way of saying that you have to build stuff as you're going forward because it's going to make your learning journey much easier and much more enjoyable. But there is a caveat here, which I'm sorry to say is another mistake that you need to avoid while project-based learning. And that is the mistake of building projects that are too impressively big too fast. And I know from personal experience that this is a mistake that can really take a lot of your time and waste it because I've fallen in this trap personally of trying to build stuff that was impressive and big and ambitious, but I wasn't ready for it. So to avoid making this mistake, you want to make sure that your projects at first are going to be small scope. So you want something that solves a small problem in your life or a small problem that you identify for a potential market, but you want it to be easy to code for you with just a tiny bit of challenge. And also you want it to be able to be completed in like 100 lines of codes max. You don't want to be spending 300, 400, 500 lines of codes because it's just going to be way too much for you when you're beginning. And if you keep this small scope idea in mind when you're building projects, well, you're going to quickly realize that you are learning much faster than if you were to try to build stuff bigger like I did. And finally, the last mistake that you really want to avoid as a beginner is trying to reprogram the entire world. Now, what I mean by that is to try to code every single concept that you come across, whether it's important or not. So hear me out. When you're first starting to code, it's very important for you to develop the habit of quickly identifying if a new concept is worth your time or if it's just something that should be skimmed over. Sometimes you really want to spend the time and the energy to try to understand and fully grasp something like algorithms and data structures are super important to be a good programmer. But other times it's okay to just copy paste code from Stack Overflow, and it's okay to just use an API that does the job for you. And it's okay to use libraries that make jobs so much simpler. So don't try to code every single detail of a program that you come across. Just identify the concepts that are important for you to learn, code these, and the rest, try to take the easy route. It's gonna make everything so much easier for you. Thank you all so much for watching, and please hit like and subscribe as it really encourages me to do more videos like this. But speaking of doing more, I know that some of you guys are still just starting your coding journey and others are really far into it, but others of you guys are probably just daydreaming about leaving your job and becoming a self-taught programmer. And I know because I was there like really not too long ago. And if that person is you, well, I really invite you to click on this video where I explain how I have managed at the age of 29 to just do a complete career change. I was in a complete different field and I managed to change careers by risking nothing, by not sacrificing my salary, by not going back to school. So if you're interested in how I did that, well, click on that video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.